Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. Okay, today I'm going to talk about my miter gauge. If you remember the other day, I showed you my fence system that I made for this that really, instead of using the sled, I'll probably be using the miter gauge a lot. I've always used table saw sleds, but with the smaller blade on my table saw, I find myself turning more and more to my miter gauge instead of the sled so that I don't lose that depth of that sled, the bottom of the sled. Anyway, so if you remember back, let me bring this down. This is our work area right here. So, and here's my saw blade, and here's my miter gauge. I made this fence for it. It has a shop-made track system on the backside for my attachment bolts, and I made this shop-made instead of using an aluminum one is because if I raise that blade too high, it could go into this, and I wanted to avoid it going into the metal. So, so I decided to just stay with something that's made out of wood. So, to put it on, this particular miter gauge has slots in it. I like that, but you can. Some of them had just bolt holes through in different ways. How you attach it, you probably have to kind of figure it out, or find something like this. This one in particular, it works really well, and I'm happy with it. So this is my fence system that I've got on it now. I just dropped that on there, and now this thing, I can adjust it anywhere I want. So if I want to adjust it out here to the end on my blade, I can bring it out, set it right there, hold down on it gently to the table, and then pull gently against the miter gauge flat. And I'm just touching that blade there. And I just snug these down. Not super tight at all, just enough to hold it in place. And I now have zero clearance on the edge here, on this fence. One thing I didn't tell you last time about my fence, this is extra long over this. I wish I had actually made it probably another 2 or 3 inches longer, because there are going to be times when you're going to have to cut this down and clean it up as you use it over the life of this fence. And it would be nice, or maybe once in a while, you might have to absolutely cut a 45 on here, and then come back and cut a 90 after you're done. So it'd be nice to have that extra space for doing those types of things on the end. So making this a little longer than this probably is a good idea, but that's up to you. Anyway, I can use this on either side, and I actually can use it on either table saw. I have my dado stack table saw here with a miter gauge. It's a contractor saw, but this thing works in both of them. So I can use this over there or here, and I can get the zero clearance. As you can see here, I have one that was used on that table saw here for something I did when I used this. So this is going to get torn up after a while, and once it does, then I'll take this top track off. I'll either remake this, or I'll just put a 1/4 inch hardboard on here. The only other thing I think I want to do to this is I do want to put some 600 grit or 400 grit sandpaper, I think, on the surface so that it's not quite so slick. So, but other than that, this actually works pretty well. Now we have to work on attachments, which is why you're here today, because I've got an attachment for my Incra, but I also have a couple others. So let me show you real quick. This is just a simple stop block. I shaped a carriage bolt head so that I can slip it on here, and I can put this on there real quick and easy. And this will go anywhere along here I want, so I can use it from either side when I got it where I want it. Just a quick twist, and now I have this here. And this is exactly square to the table. So, and square to the fence. So at this point, this is a pretty good square corner for me to do cuts of a particular size. In either direction, I can cut it in this way on here, this way, or even this way to get good full support from my stop. So this is my normal stop that I use most of the time. Very simple. I like to keep things simple. But there are times when you want to flip your stop up and down. Now I looked over and I found this that wasn't really, I almost never use it. This goes on my Incra 5000 table saw sled. And I can put it back over there just by popping this piece off, because the only thing I modified on this was I added, with a little bit of CA glue, a piece here so that it would reach the tabletop. But this just drops right on there. This width is the same as this. So it just drops right on there, and then I can tighten it down anywhere I want. So I just bring it down, adjust where I want it, and I snug it up. And there it is. And it flips up out of the way. And again, I can use it on both sides. Now, this is only temporary because I do want a flip stop, but there is a problem with the Incras. This way is fine. This way is fine to get to the fence, but if I put it this way, I can no longer hit my fence. It actually is hitting this area up here. So I really want to replace this with something that I'm going to make myself, I think, eventually. But at least for now, I have a nice flip stop, which will have its uses. So I can easily grab this one instead and use it if I want. So as far as lining this up, and I have it here right now, as you saw, I have it set to my blade. I also have some relief cuts pre-cut in here. There's a 45 on each side. That is so I can do it from either side. But if I want to use support on both sides of the piece I'm cutting, I can actually just move this over, and let's use the short one. I can line it up to that on the blade, feel for where I'm at in the center of my curve, and I snug it down, and now I have a zero clearance cut right here that I can line to, I can measure to, or anything else I want to do. So it's easy to reset this. And again, over here, same thing. Quick and easy. Bring it out. Line it up to your cut. Like so. It's a little high. Let me roll it down though. So it goes right there. Make sure I'm kind of centered. Hold this down and against here. And just kind of snug it up. And now I have zero clearance right here. Support on both sides. Now, if I want to use my Incra on here, I do use my Incra Jig for a lot of things. So I made this base here for my Incra. And this slides onto here with these. So I would take this, bring it over, slide it up on there, and then I can now use it. This is my end of my piece. So if I want to set this to 0, so I'm going to take and extend this out and set it to 0. Like so. Now this, I can bring this back. Now I'm going to bring this up till it just touches my blade and snug this down. And there we are. We now have 0 accurate to to 1/4 of an inch. Excuse me, to 1/32 of an inch. I am now accurate. And if I want to use it, for example, remember this is my magic block. When I did that last box, it's 2 inches exactly here, 1.5 inches here. So if I set this to 2 inches, and snug it back down. And by the way, you heard that rubbing? If I unscrewed that another 1/2 turn, it wouldn't have done that. So this works really smoothly when you use it. Anyway, I've just set to 2 inches. So if I put this here, you can see it just clears. And it's just right there making contact to my cutting blade. So it's perfectly 2 inches. So no matter where I set this now, I now have this capability to now do accurate shortcuts up to 8 inches long using my jig. And I have not modified this jig at all. So let's take, real quick, let's set it up, and from doing it on this side, let's say I want to do my cuts from the other side. I can set it over here. Let's move this over, and let's set our fence to this 0 clearance right here. Tighten down. Now let's do this. In order to do this, now I'm going to replace these because this I have to use a tool, and I'm going to put some kind of wood knob on here probably before I'm done. But all I have to do to reverse it so that you can come to the other side of the blade is I take these out and I turn it around, butt this up against here, and now I can put these into the same two. Oh, let me show you real quick. What I did is equal distance in from both sides. I put these inserts here. They're just 1/4-20s. And so that when I put it over here, I use these two. And when I flip it around, I use these two. And it comes out the same. So I bring this up, bring my fence up against my body of the jig. And everything is lined up just perfect. So that I can now get these started. And I just bring them down, back them off 1/4 of a turn so we can adjust it. Now we're going to do a final adjustment. Make sure we're pushed up against there. And I like to try to put it up against this fence here. Like so that it's square for sure. And then I just snug these down. And now this is ready to go in the other direction. So now I can take it. Now we're going to move this bolt here though. And we're going to put it down on this bolt so that we don't need both of them. This would probably be more than enough in all reality if you wanted to use it. So we'll set this to 0. Like so. And I am going to put this one on. You only need one, but this one's going to be pretty close to the edge. So I'm going to let this one carry the load of holding it still. Because most of the time, all I need to do is just tighten up one of these, I have found. So I move to the other end. Whoops. Should have put it in there first. There we go. Now we go to this side. And I bring it up next to my fence. Like so. And snug these down. Doesn't take much. And now I'm set to 0 and I'm on the left side of the blade instead. So if I set this to 2 inches. Boy, that's hard to see. I got to do something about the lettering in here. Color it or something. But I set it to 2 inches. So if I take my magic block. And that just fits in there. Just right. So. This is now set to this side accurately. As you can see, I could get the same repeatable cut now every time on this thing using the jig. So the jig is handy to have this, especially if you have to go back and do repeatable cuts or make cuts really accurate. Set this up, and as long as you're less than 8 inches, you can do this. If you needed to, you could set this, use a longer one of these. You could set this further back and use a magic block as a spacer, and you would add this distance. So I could add 2 inches to my amount here, making this 0, and then I would have to do math. But I could go to 10 inches then by moving it back 2 inches using this gauge. So you can get a little more out of it, but then you start getting into having to use math. That's up to you. I've done that, but I try to use this mostly if I'm going to be at 8 inches or less. That's the restriction of this jig. I love this jig. As you can see, it's a very handy tool to have around the shop. I haven't had to modify this at all to use it, which is the other beauty of this thing. So I set it back to 0, and if I need to use this over on my bandsaw instead, since I haven't really modified it, I can actually take this off of there completely in just a couple of minutes. Like so. And now I can take this and use it. Let me bring that into the picture. I just took it, it just slides out of the slots. And I can take this, use it on one of my jigs, on my bandsaw, or on my orbital, on my belt sander, or wherever else I want to use it. I can use this, and I have not modified anything on it. This comes with such a fine selection of anchor points and adjustability. I've never had to drill or modify any of the holes in here. And this is really a great one to have. Now I will tell you, this is, let's start rambling here. I actually have 4 of these around the shop. But I didn't pay more than $20 a piece for any of them, except the last one. I bought a black one, the newest one. These are the old style, the gray ones. You can buy these sometimes on eBay for $20. But I paid no more than $20 for 3 of them. And I paid, I think, $60 or $50 for the other one. Being newer, those are still pretty pricey. And you can buy them brand new for, I think, $80 approximately. You have to check at Woodpeck or at Incra, wherever you can buy Incra products. This is called it's called an Incra Jig, but it's called the, it doesn't have that name on here. The incremental jig, the Incra Micro Adjust, I don't remember. Anyway, just call it an Incra Jig, because the one that you use for measuring spaces, the smaller one, doesn't have any of the attachments to it. That is not called a jig. That's called something else. So, if you look for this and you find one of these, even just a basic unit is all you need. Just make sure it has all of the double. You should have 4 of these pieces with the teeth marked, with the teeth in them. That's what does the alignment on the Incra system. Just make sure that your body comes with those and the bolts to hold it in place. And if you get this thing really is very nice. Now, you know, I might actually take, just now thought, what if I took the Incra part out of that and used it just as a sliding? Because this thing actually slides and sets exactly where it's supposed to. That maybe I could actually use this in conjunction with some others. I don't know why you couldn't just do away with those on this jig. Maybe I might try that. Take 2 of them off and see, let it just slide, because it is kind of a pain to move it around and get it. But once you get there and you lock it down, you are right there. But I think you could micro adjust this with a little wood hammer once you just snug it down a little bit to line up to your marks, so that you can actually use this even without the Incra. I think this would be a great jig. I'm going to have to do that now. I never thought about that before, taking those off. You just watched me go outside the box on a spur of the moment. So, anyway, that's the whole thing. This thing works great. It works good on here. It's easy to put on, take off. Minimum number of pieces for doing this. So I can, and that way I can use it. Only takes a minute to put it back on. If you have any questions, any comments, or any way that you've done it, let me know. So I've always had this mounted on my sleds, and I just screwed it down on there with regular wood screws as a general rule. But having this jig so I can use it on here actually makes this a lot nicer. And it's really pretty easy to reverse it. So I really like so far the way this looks, except for those bolts. I am definitely going to have to do something different for those bolts. So stay tuned. As I make other improvements to this, I have some other jigs I want to make for this. A circle cutting jig for one thing. I also want to make a different attachment for this. Rather than just the block, I'm thinking of making one with a block and with a top piece like this. This is a little tall, so that when this is on here like this, I have a nice tall fence. Put a couple slots in here. Now I can actually clamp things in here, and I can set this up to do all sorts of things where you need your piece held vertical this way, like tenons. If you wanted to make some kind of tenon, you'd be able to use this to make tenons then. So I'm going to make one more attachment for this. So stay tuned when I get that going and get it working. I'll let you take a look at it and see what you think. If you have any suggestions, or if you beat me to the draw and make yours before I make mine, don't be afraid to let me know and send me pictures. Maybe it'll help me make mine even better. So that's the whole thing. I love it. This thing is actually great. This is a great add-on to my miter gauge. So you don't need a table saw sled. This thing is actually going to do everything my table saw sled does by the time I'm done, and then some. So I'm looking forward to using this more than a table saw sled. And the other beauty is I have to have 2 table saw sleds for the 2 saws. With this, I only need one miter gauge, which is the beauty of it. So it's really going to be a great improvement to my shop, and maybe some of these ideas might even work on your shop. So now that I'm done rambling, like I said, comments, thoughts, just leave them down below. If you like this video or you learned something here, hit that like button. It lets me know I'm doing the right thing. If you hit the dislike, leave me a comment. Let me know what it is you didn't like, so maybe I can improve it. I doubt it. Maybe. You never know. But most importantly, though, please come back again, because we're nowhere near done. Thanks. And we'll see you guys again very soon. If I can get this turned off. There we go. No, I'm not going to edit this part out.